And things like what other people think of you is also none of your business.
Mm-hmm.
And who follows that perfectly? Who doesn't give thought to how do people see me?
Mm-hmm.
Am I seen as good? Am I seen as competent?
I'm Susan Goss, and as a seasoned therapist of more than 15 years, I'm honored to have had the opportunity to gain so much wisdom from so many people and love passing that knowledge on to others. So join me and some of my favorite friends as we share some tangible truths with you.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Tangible Truth Podcast. I'm Susan Goss, and I still have with us Dr. Ryan Rana. It's hard for me to say Dr. Ryan. I'm just
don't
saying
say
Ryan.
It. Let's just go Ryan.
Okay, Ryan. So Ryan's with us again. Ryan, hey.
Good to be here.
Okay, you too. I'm just so anxious to get started again because we talk so fast.
I know.
And we just have to get right on it. So we're going to start with a phrase that, man, how many times do we say this one? Comparison breeds discontentment. And I add a little phrase, unless you're buying a refrigerator and you've got to compare prices, which is true, or a car or whatever. But comparison breeding discontentment. It's a big phrase.
It's huge.
It really is. You want to jump in first?
Man, this is a tough one. And this is one of those universal rules that nobody breaks. You can try to break it, but it's a little bit like jumping off a roof. Gravity is a universal rule. And you're not going to fly upward.
No, you're not.
And so this is
Good
an incredible discipline because it's so natural. It's a theme of my 3 episodes here is like, how do I not let the natural flesh take over? How do I work against it and live from my faith and from my values as opposed to, just the inertia of life? But comparison breeds discontentment. Credit for me. I got this from Dr. Adrian Hickman, former professor, director of a place called Capstone Treatment Center. I don't know where he got it. He probably would credit somebody else, but this is a huge one. I'd love to hear your thoughts before I keep babbling on.
We talked about Adrian in our February episodes on our addiction to porn.
He's a brilliant guy.
Yeah, he must be.
He is.
I need to meet him in person.
My wife calls him the smartest redneck in the world. Hopefully Adrian doesn't listen. No, he would like that. He would like that term.
Well, comparison breeds discontentment is one of the biggest statements as it relates to your heart. I'm going to say more than anything, I'm going to go real practical and simple first, and then we can unpack it. But from a heart issue, you can be very innocently looking. Ryan, you mentioned the social media technology and everything. You can innocently be looking at your phone and immediately hate what you already have. So that's a very practical piece of comparison. Anybody can love what they have literally and think they're content, but then start scrolling and all of a sudden they're discontent with what they have because they like something else better, or they like somebody else's family photo better. They seem to be happier or whatever. Or they start comparing their family and their marriage to somebody else because it seems better. Comparison, when you start comparing others' marriage, others' family, others' children, even others' anything, vacation, you pick it, car, home, then you feel just a little, if not a lot, slighted, discontented, but your heart, it's a matter of the heart in that area of content, and that's where it starts.
Yeah.
And so it's a road that starts, and it's almost like a hamster wheel. It never stops.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is, when we're told in Scripture to walk by faith and to trust God, we all get all sentimental and want to start singing a hymn. But what we should do when someone says you got to walk by faith is go, oof. That's if you start thinking what that means, that's a really hard message.
It is.
For whatever reason, the way God set this up was not easy. And that's made really clear.
It is made really clear. Even in, I don't want to interrupt, but I do need to say in Scripture, it says in Galatians, walk by the Spirit or you will carry out the desires of the flesh. Yep. It doesn't say if.
Right.
Or you will carry out the desires of the flesh. This is comparison.
Yeah. And that's 4,000 years ago. And it's been true every day since. I like it. That's a theme of these 3 episodes, I think, right there. Mm-hmm. So I think, what faith is like, hey, I'm going to send you out to do something really hard and it's going to be scary. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have a blindfold on and just go ahead and do it anyway. Mm-hmm. That's what it means. Mm-hmm. And our flesh is like, no, mm-hmm. I want control of this. Mm-hmm. And I think comparison gets into my belief speaking as a therapist here a little bit, the fundamental instinct of humans, actually of any mammal, is neither good or evil. It's like breathing. And it is, where do I fit in the herd? Right. Mm-hmm. Because if a cow doesn't have a place in the herd, they're in danger. Mm-hmm. They're going to die. And so that instinct, I think, is underneath this. Mm-hmm. But then that's where I think God kind of says, okay, now trust me. I'll provide the herd. I'll provide for you. Just be simple and sort of follow my spirit. I'll take care of that. And our flesh goes, mm-hmm. I want to look at what everybody else has and who they are. And am I as good or am I better? Am I worse? And so goes your ability to find peace. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really, really crucial that walking in this faith is like, hey, what other people have is none of your business. Mm-hmm. Their accounts, what I've done with them, none of your concern. When we start trying to pay attention to other people's accounts, we're in the wrong chair. Mm-hmm. We're inadvertently playing God as opposed to following, right? And so goes our peace, so goes our contentment. Even things like what other people think of you is also none of your business. Mm-hmm. And who follows that perfectly? Who doesn't give thought to, how do people see me? Mm-hmm. Am I seen as good? Am I seen as competent? Mm-hmm. And it's like, those are thoughts that they're not good. Mm-hmm. So I got one more thing to say, but I want to give you space to jump in.
No, go ahead.
Well, I think there's a little hidden piece of this, and I can't remember where I got this. It may have been from Adrian. People, when you say people talk about pornography or something, I'm sure this has come up that this gets into that, right? If you're comparing your partner with what you're seeing on screen, which isn't even real. Mm-hmm. Now that's true. But I think there's a little hidden thing here. Even if I'm comparing positively, it still kills my contentment. Mm-hmm. So if I drive a truck, we drive those in Arkansas, and my truck is 100 times better than this other truck. And I start to sit there and go, man, I sure like what I got a lot better than what he's got or she's got. It still has a similar effect. Mm-hmm. So comparison at all is us being out of our chair. We've lost orientation. We've lost the place that we're supposed to be, moving for control, trying to sort of sit in God's chair. Mm-hmm. And I think my best speculation is a little bit like jumping off the house. Mm-hmm. And you whether you believed it or not, you become a believer right then. Mm-hmm. That gravity is this universal rule. I think there's other universal rules maybe that were set up thousands and thousands of years ago that we inadvertently step in this trap because it's a sin of judgment. Who is to evaluate who's good? Mm-hmm. I was talking to a young man who's struggling with some of this. I'm like, well, who's to say which woman's beautiful? Mm-hmm. How do you define that? Who gets to define that? Mm-hmm. Are you the definer? Mm-hmm. And it's like, where am I getting that? Mm-hmm. And regardless, I'm in the wrong chair and we can't recover. Mm-hmm. So I see so many clients who are like looking for a strategy to win out of that chair. I'm like, there's not one. Mm-hmm. You're in the wrong chair. Mm-hmm. Right. So this deep universal judgment in this, or covet, talking about 10 commandments. And so we've stepped all in that. And what I think is at its base level is just saying, do I have a place in the herd? Mm-hmm. And now we're supposed to mature ourselves. And I'm not even big on thought stopping as a concept, but this is one of the areas. It's like, hey, get out of there. Stop yourself before you finish the first question, as opposed to the 3 hours of ruminating on this that sometimes we often do.
And I think comparison, it is a big conversation because it's hard we had this conversation. We had a lot of this conversation last night in our own community group about learning. It was wrapped around spiritual gifts, actually, we were talking about, but it wrapped around embracing, staying in our own lane, being happy for that, staying in our lane, but being happy for you, being super happy for you and being your cheerleader, so to speak, and embracing because we're so different and embracing each other's gifts and celebrating that because we need each other. But seeing that outside of comparison, outside of the realm of comparison, which takes us outside of ourselves. So the conversation was leaning itself toward, this takes Jesus. This takes Jesus, not flesh. Like we have to get outside of ourselves and recognize what you are describing, which is the Holy Spirit. That's why it says, the verse that I was referring to, walk by the Spirit, or we do stay in the flesh in comparison, but in the Spirit, I can see the good. I can see the good in your gift. I can see your truck because I can see, like you were saying, I'm in a great truck and you don't have to say, at least I'm not in that truck, whether you've got a better truck, all the comparison, whether it's good or bad, or I wish I had that truck, but it keeps you, if you're in the Spirit, I'm just happy and grateful I'm in my truck. Or whatnot. Right. I'm just using that as an example because you threw it out there. But just embracing and being content in my lane, no matter what truck, no matter what I'm in my ministry or in my family or whatever God has me in. The contentment is the issue, I think, of the heart. Because it's the wellspring of our life.
I'm all over the place on this thought, but there's a song by Leonard Skinner. But I bet they hadn't come up in your podcast before.
Leonard Skinner, maybe not.
Yeah, I'm not really a fan. I did see their documentary on Netflix, and it's amazing. So I kind of was curious, but it's so popular. It's called Simple Man.
Oh yeah, I know Simple Man,
and it just appeals to all of us, people of all kinds of faith, because there's something about it that's just true. There's something about our spirit that's like, that's how it's supposed to be. But this topic, I promise you, of all the topics you've had, there's not one of them that applies more to everyone than this one.
Yeah, comparison.
It's almost impossible to eliminate. And maybe that's not the target. Maybe a little bit here and there is just natural. But I think we got to be careful, because if you want to look around you and know that it's happening, just look at clothing.
Oh, yeah.
You're wearing Nike. I'm wearing Under Armour.
Yeah.
How do you know that's cool? You just look at what everybody else wears.
Yeah.
Hairstyles, what was cool in the 70s. And it's this natural process going on behind the scenes that we sometimes don't realize is actually a spiritual war over your contentment. And, my old professor used to say, actually said this on day one of counseling school, which is 27 years ago now. He said, all this talk about self-esteem, you want to know about low self-esteem? It's high self-focus. So you see this comparison process. What it does is it wraps yourself in this sort of world where you're constantly focused on, where do I measure up? Am I enough? Am I enough? And
so focus on you.
The more times you ask that question, the answer is always going to be no. The trick out of low self-esteem is to embrace the fact that's not about you.
That's right.
I'm just a part of a team.
Yeah. The herd.
The herd. That's right. Back to the herd.
Back to the herd.
Yep.
Where do I fit in the herd?
That's right.
Okay. So that we have time to get at least another one in, I wanted to move to another phrase. This is a big one, I think. Our relationships are as healthy as we are individually. That's a pretty big one.
Yep.
Our relationships, I'm going to say that again. Our relationships are as healthy as we are individually. So if I am not a healthy person individually, then how would I expect my relationship with my spouse or my child to be a healthy relationship together? It's very important for me, again, my phrase, to have a mirror moment with God, or even your example of walking in before you go and train a group of people. If you're very unhealthy to begin with, and you are going to be worried to death. Do they like me? What's my feedback going to be? Am I nervous? That is more about you. Or if I am going to take everything personally in my relationship with my husband, if everything Steve says to me, I take personally, then our marriage is going to be greatly affected by that. So relationships are as healthy as we are individually. How I say it best, I think, is, and I believe this 100%, my sessions are as healthy as I am individually as a therapist. So I stay very healthy. I try to as a therapist. I have a therapist. I spend a great amount of time with the Lord. This is a sanctuary to me when I come in and I'm asking God to speak to my couples. So my sessions go as well as I'm healthy. Does that mean I sometimes have crappy sessions? Well, yeah, but that's the process of therapy. Trusting God and trust the process of therapy.
I agree. It's well said. Just trying to put some terms around that. So unhealthy can be a little vague for people, so for me, I think about disconnected, a divided self.
Good.
So divided within me, divided spiritually, divided relationally, and then throw in a little side of I've left my painful memories. I've not done my work. Right? Because all of us would like to say, the past is in the past. I'm like, no, sir. Past is everywhere you look.
Exactly.
Because that's what the brain is doing to make sure you don't die. And so the most significant losses and hurts in your life, your body sees them everywhere. Fancy terms like projection come out of that. Now my therapist hat comes on. I'm a little concerned about mixing categories here, but I like to think about the word self-protection and I like to think about the word repair. Those are the enemies when it comes to studying intimacy at the research level. What destroys relationship? Rigid patterns of self-protection. What heals relationships? The ability to repair the bond. And so unhealthy or healthy shows up in the middle of all of that. If my body is divided, if I've not sort of worked through, made a little bit of peace with the things that have hurt me, I'm going to show up and be rigid. And my body's going to prioritize protecting me, right back to our first topic, over relationship. And what's funny is that happens because none of us have arrived. So what we know from the research, it's just like, okay, so can you be flexible enough to come self-reflect and repair and say, hey, it's not how I saw it, but you know what? You might be right. Here's probably how I could have handled that better, and you can do the same and boom, we're good. Now we keep the love flowing, in the kingdom, so to speak, or our personal division doesn't allow that. And so we show up in rigid ways. You can have the best intentions in the world, but if I show up that way, it's not going to work.
It will not work.
As you and I see all the time in our office.
Yes, all the time. 100%. Well, Ryan, I did not get through my list, but we'll have to do this another time.
Well, I want to say one last thing about that to challenge us all.
Okay.
Are you healthy or unhealthy? The reality is you can't know, right? Because you don't see yourself. This is why it's so crucial to have a team of people who you love and who you know, who you can trust enough for someone to say, hey, man, you're going kind of fast. Are you all right? Right? Because we don't know.
Yeah.
And where the world is full of, these huge leaders and pastors who, they're all in the headlines from doing something horrible. But, as the song goes, it was a slow fade and you can think that you're doing fine and healthy right until you hit enough pressure to find out you're not. And so I just think it's really important that we try to set up our lives surrounded by people who can let us know, hey, your responses are real fast right now. Are you all right? You seem more irritable than normal. Because I think it's hard to know for sure how we're doing.
I think that's great advice and a great way to end our podcast. We need community. God designed us to need Him and to need each other.
Absolutely.
So I think it's a great way to end. Ryan, I just so appreciate you joining me on the Tangible Truth podcast. It has been fun to be back together again.
It's been my pleasure.
So we appreciate it. Listeners, thank you. We love you, and we will see you in April. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Tangible Truth Podcast, part of the KLRC Podcast Network.